All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we have a story about Concord, and this is a huge one, okay? And I spoke about this on a live stream on Hypnocast, and I wanted to do a separate dedicated video talking about the $400 million loss that is Concord. Apparently, according to Colin Moriarty, he recently made a video on his podcast, and he has insider information from developers over at Concord and people over at Sony that have admitted that Concord was actually not a $200 million loss, which is what a lot of people were estimating in the beginning, but apparently it is a $400 plus million loss. And the beautiful thing about that number is that it doesn't even include what it cost Sony to buy Firewalk Studios in the first place.
Yes! And a more offensive spectacle I cannot recall!
Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is an absolutely insane number, and it's something that, to be honest with you, when you hear it, it's like, yeah, it's an insane number. It's wild. It's probably the highest number in terms of a budget we have heard out of any AAA game, to be honest with you. Even Spider-Man 2 was in the $200-some-odd million range. Spider-Man 3 is estimated to be in the $350 million range. But apparently Concord, the DEI teen shooter Concord, was $400 million plus. So let's get into this article, guys, from that part place. But of course, before we do, if you are new here, just consider hitting that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it, and like the video to push us out into that YouTube algorithm. Now, again, guys, this is a supposedly verified source from Colin Moriarty, but at the end of the day, it's still a rumor, right? But I can see, based off the information that he's given, I can see how this is possible, but only up to a point, right? Because I can believe, sure, they spent this much money, but at the end of the day, I'm going to question, what the hell did they spend this money on? This is absolutely insane that they spent this much money on this video game, and that doesn't even include what it costs for them to buy the studio that's making the video game in the first place. But let's go over the details, because that's really what's going to break this all down. So it says, a rumor from Colin Moriarty, the host of Sacred Symbols, claims that Firewalk Studios Concord, which was shut down around 2 weeks after it released, cost $400 million to develop. Moriarty detailed in a video uploaded to X that he spoke extensively with a Concord insider who informed him that Concord cost about $400 million to make. He went on to reveal that Probably Monsters, by the way, Probably Monsters is the studio that originally owned Concord, and they sold it off to Sony. And like I say every single video, and I'm going to say it again in this video, the person who made that decision over at Probably Monsters to sell Concord back in 22 or 23, whenever they bought it, because they saw the writing on the wall, that is a genius. Whoever that was is an absolute genius that they avoided this massive loss that Sony just took on its chin. But anyway, let's continue. The original owner of Firewalk Studios and Concord, before selling to PlayStation Studios, Sony and the game's original investors had spent $200 million on the game before it even made it to its alpha state. So this game cost $200 million before it even reached the alpha state. It wasn't even in a state where it could be considered retail ready. After $200 million, that is absolutely insane. How incompetent could your development team possibly be that a game like this can cost you $200 million and you have almost nothing to show for it? It's honestly freaking disgusting. I really can't wrap my mind around how incompetent of a developer team that must be for that to even remotely happen. But I mean, this is where we're at, right? Moriarty then said up to the point of the game went to alpha state that had already spent $200 million on it. And it's unclear how much of that money is from Probably Monsters and the original investors into the game, and how much of that was from Sony. Next, he shared when the game had $200 million spent on it, it was basically in an alpha form in Q1 of 23. From that point until the game launched, Sony spent another $200 million on it. So the game cost $200 million and they only made it to an alpha phase. The game was not retail ready. Sony had to then spend another $200 million to get the game to the point of where we saw it when it was in the trailer. And what we saw in the trailer was obviously not impressive enough to get people to want to spend $40 on this game, right? So, I mean, it is such an absolute waste of money. Think about what Sony could have did with $400 million. There was anything would have been better than Concord at that point. It says the scuttlebutt behind the scenes about Concord is that the game was in a laughable shape when it was shown. Basically, when the alpha was ready to go, he continued, it was in such a horrible shape that Sony felt they needed to spend that much money again. So 200 plus 200 to get the game to the MVP, minimum viable product status, not to the status of it being a great game, just to get it to viability. A major expense was to urgently outsource much of the game to other studios to finish building the game out. He shared, and that two fundamental games were not worked on at all up until the point in which the game was shown in alpha. Onboarding, nothing about that. There was nothing about how players make their character, all that kind of stuff, or chose their character and get there. And monetization, two very expensive, very specific, and boutique things that happen to games like this. So this game didn't even have its monetization set up, which is exactly why, after learning about this story, now I understand why the game costs $40 at retail, right? Because here's the problem. You cannot make a free-to-play game go live without a actual monetization strategy. If you make this game go live and you don't have a way to nickel and dime your players, then you can't go free-to-play. It's just not possible. You're essentially going to lose money, and there's no reason for you to do that. So I think what ended up happening is that Sony had to panic, right? Sony panicked because they were running out of time. They already had lost $400 million trying to get this game to some sort of playable state, and then they said, shit, we don't even have a monetization set up. What are we gonna do? And somebody probably panicked and said, well, we could just add a retail price and try to recoup some costs from there, because this is totally gonna be the next big Star Wars. You know, that's what they thought. They thought this game was gonna be Star Wars level of an IP for Sony. They thought it was gonna be the next big thing. They thought it was gonna take over for Horizon, and little did we know, it massively flopped. Then it says that he noted that at Sony, they were describing the game as a future of PlayStation, that they had such major ambition for this game, and that it was referred to internally as a Star Wars project for Sony, that it could be repeatedly revisited over and over and over again, not only in cross-media, but in what we are seeing. He pointed to the game being featured in Prime Video's upcoming Secret Levels show, as well as the weekly story vignettes that the developers promised. Next, he shared that there was a toxic positivity vibe, which, by the way, like I said in my live stream, it's amazing how all it takes is for Asmongold to talk about what we've been talking about for months on end, and suddenly everybody wants to start using those terms now, right? Because nobody wanted to acknowledge the toxic positivity that we have noticed for fucking months, bro. Probably even longer than months. And other people, not just me, there were a ton of people that was talking about toxic positivity, or positivity peddling, as we used to call it and whatnot. We were talking about this, and we kept talking about this, but all it took was Asmongold to react to a video and get almost 1 million views on it, and suddenly everybody's talking about toxic positivity now, because it's a thing, and it's ruining the gaming industry. You have people who are purposefully lying, both inside and out of the industry, in order to benefit themselves. Whether you have shills on YouTube or shills in terms of journalists that will totally lie and say nothing is wrong with the game, everything's fine, 7 out of 10, run the press, you know what I mean? Like, you have those people doing that, and then afterwards they're like, okay, give me my free swag, give me my sponsorship money, give me, because it's all about them. They don't give a fuck about the gaming industry, and then they'll project and try to say that we don't care about the gaming industry when we're the ones talking out about all the nonsense that they've been doing that's ruining the games and ruining the industry. So at the end of the day, man, this toxic positivity thing, I'm glad that at least Asmongold has put it on the map and people are finally talking about it and acknowledging that it exists, but it's been a big problem for a long time. He stated you weren't allowed to say anything internally about this game, about how something is wrong with it, character design's not right. They really truly believe this was Herman Holtz's baby, apparently. He internally was himself a massive champion of the game. Herman Holtz needs to be fired. Flat out. Not that it's going to matter, because the guy's a fucking millionaire at the end of the day, but he really should be fired. There needs to be some sort of accountability. I don't care who, I don't care where, but ultimately I'm giving it a month. And after a month, if we don't hear that Firewalk Studios has fired at least half of its staff, there is something severely wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. Firewalk Studios is a team of about 150 people all throughout the company, okay? Not all of them are developers, obviously, but that's still a pretty big team. 150 people in 7 years could not get Concord to anything more than an alpha state. How pathetic is that? After $200 million of investment over 7 years, you mean to tell me you couldn't get Concord to a playable, viable state? And then here's what's even worse. This company was so bad at their job that Sony had to spend another $200 million outsourcing the project to other studios to help them complete the game in a year because this company couldn't do it in 7 years. How fucking pathetic is that? So this is why I say heads need to roll at Firewalk Studios, because otherwise, all you're going to be doing is fostering an environment where people can be absolutely incompetent and get away with it, right? It's so unbelievable to me that in the entertainment industry, people can fail upward like this, but that's exactly what this is. This is the industry allowing and promoting people to fail upwards. So we need to stop this nonsense, and we need to get back to actual merit-based hiring, merit-based productivity, and let's get back to making games that are actually for the gamer. And I'm not saying it doesn't have to have woke tendencies, but what I'm saying is make the fucking game your priority first. Don't make the message your priority first. Don't make what you can do in Virtue Signal with the priority first. Make the game, make the creative process, make the story, make the action, make the gameplay, make all of that what's most important, and leave all the other shit for either last or leave it out completely. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you did enjoy it. If you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.